When you decide, you are not just changing an action, you are redefining your identity. You are telling your nervous system, your mind, and your future that the old rules no longer apply. Most people drift through life believing change happens slowly, that transformation requires years of preparation, planning, or permission. But history, personal growth, and human behavior prove something different. Lives change in an instant when a person decides with certainty. The addict decides they are done. The entrepreneur decides failure is no longer an option. The individual decides they will not tolerate disrespect, mediocrity, or fear running their life anymore. In that instant, the past loses its grip because the future is no longer negotiable. The decision interrupts patterns because patterns survive on indecision. The moment you hesitate, the old habits rush back in. The moment you say, I'll try, the familiar identity stays intact. But when you decide decisively, something shifts internally. Your standards rise. Your excuses collapse. Your brain begins searching for ways instead of reasons. That is not motivation. That is identity alignment. You are no longer acting like someone who hopes things will change. You are acting like someone who has already decided they must. Identity is the invisible force behind every behavior. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. When you decide at the level of identity, behavior follows naturally. You don't need willpower to be who you've decided to become. A person who decides they are a leader begins to lead even when it's uncomfortable. A person who decides they are strong begins to act strong even when fear shows up. A person who decides they are worthy no longer begs for validation. They stop accepting situations that contradict that truth. That is why a single decision can outweigh years of effort. Effort without decision is exhausting. Decision creates energy. It creates coherence. It creates direction. When identity shifts, actions feel different. Challenges feel meaningful instead of overwhelming. Pain feels purposeful instead of pointless. Even setbacks lose their power to define you because your identity is no longer built on outcomes. It is built on commitment. The most powerful thing about a decision is that it happens now, not tomorrow, not after conditions improve, not after confidence appears. Confidence follows decision. Clarity follows commitment. The moment you decide, you step out of reaction and into creation. You stop being at the mercy of circumstances and start shaping them. You no longer ask life what it will give you. You decide what you will demand of yourself. That single moment of decision is always available. It does not care about your past. It does not require permission. It only asks one thing. Are you willing to decide who you are now and live from that place starting today? Most people say they want change, but very few are truly committed to it. And the difference is everything. Wishing feels safe because it costs nothing. You can wish for a better life, better health, better relationships, and still stay exactly where you are. Wishing allows you to keep your comfort, your excuses, and your identity intact. Commitment, on the other hand, is disruptive. It challenges the way you live, the choices you make, and the standards you accept. That is why so many people confuse desire with decision and hope with action. When you wish for change, you're still negotiating with your limitations. You're saying, I want this, but only if it's easy, only if it doesn't hurt, only if I don't have to give anything up. Wishing leaves the door open to retreat. It gives fear a voice. It allows circumstances to stay in control. Commitment closes that door. Commitment says, no matter what happens, I'm moving forward. It doesn't require certainty. It creates it. It doesn't wait for confidence. It builds it through action. Real change begins the moment you stop asking, can I do this? And start declaring this must change. That shift turns problems into priorities. When something is a priority, you find a way. When it's just a wish, you find an excuse. You don't need more time, more motivation, or more approval. You need to decide that staying the same is no longer acceptable. That decision transforms obstacles into feedback instead of stop signs. Commitment also changes how pain is experienced. When you are only wishing, discomfort feels like proof you should stop. When you are committed, discomfort becomes part of the process. You expect it. You welcome it as evidence that you are growing. The struggle no longer weakens you, it sharpens you. You stop asking for life to be easier and start asking yourself to be stronger. The reason commitment works is because it reshapes your standards. You no longer tolerate what contradicts your future. You stop allowing habits, relationships, and environments that pull you backward. This is where most people hesitate, because commitment demands sacrifice. It demands that you let go of who you've been to become who you need to be. Wishing asks nothing of you. Commitment asks everything and gives you freedom in return. When you commit, your behavior changes even on the days you don't feel like it. You act from identity instead of emotion. You move even when fear is present. You show up even when motivation disappears. That is how momentum is built, not through intensity, but through consistency powered by decision. Every small action reinforces the belief that you are the kind of person who follows through. The truth is, life responds differently to commitment. Opportunities appear when you show up fully. People take you seriously when you take yourself seriously. Your mind becomes an ally instead of a battleground. The gap between where you are and where you want to be begins to close. Not because circumstances change, but because you do. Change never rewards those who wish from a distance. It rewards those who commit with their actions, their energy, and their standards. The moment you stop wishing and start committing, you stop waiting for life to happen and start making it happen. Lasting transformation does not begin with logic, it begins with emotion. People do not change because something makes sense. They change because something becomes urgent. You can intellectually understand what you should do, know exactly what habits are holding you back, and still stay stuck for years. Information alone has never moved human behavior. What moves people is emotional leverage, the deep, undeniable feeling that continuing on the same path is no longer an option. When emotion is strong enough, action becomes inevitable. Every major shift in your life can be traced back to a moment where emotion tipped the scale, a moment when pain outweighed comfort, when frustration overpowered fear, or when desire became stronger than doubt. That emotional charge is not weakness, it is fuel. It is the force that pushes you through resistance when your mind starts negotiating. Without it, even the best plans collapse under pressure. Most people wait for motivation, not realizing that motivation is emotional and fleeting. Emotional leverage is different. It is created intentionally by associating massive pain to staying the same and massive pleasure to changing. When you vividly feel what it will cost you to not change, lost time, lost health, lost self-respect, lost potential, the idea of inaction becomes unbearable. At the same time, when you emotionally connect to what change will give you, freedom, pride, connection, purpose, your nervous system begins pulling you forward instead of holding you back. This is why some people change overnight while others struggle for decades. It is not intelligence, resources, or talent. It is emotional intensity. When the emotional reasons are strong enough, The how becomes less intimidating. You stop asking if it's possible and start asking what needs to be done. Emotion collapses hesitation. It overrides old patterns and forces a new level of action. Emotional leverage also locks in commitment. When change is driven by shallow reasons, it fades at the first sign of discomfort. But when it is driven by deep emotional truth, it sustains you through difficulty. You don't quit because quitting would hurt more than continuing. You don't go back because going back would betray who you've decided to become. That is the power of linking emotion to identity and purpose. People often try to suppress emotion, thinking it makes them irrational. In reality, emotion is what gives decisions weight. Without it, decisions remain abstract. With it, decisions become real. Your body listens, your focus sharpens, your energy aligns. Emotion is what turns intention into action and action into habit. If you want real change, you must stop asking yourself what you should do and start asking what you must do. You must make staying the same emotionally unacceptable. You must feel the consequences of inaction so deeply that your system refuses to tolerate them any longer. At the same time, you must emotionally step into the future you want so vividly that it feels more real than your current limitations. When emotional leverage is activated, discipline becomes natural. Consistency becomes automatic. You are no longer forcing yourself forward. You are being pulled by a reason that matters. And once that emotional switch flips, change is no longer a struggle. It becomes a necessity. And from that place, transformation becomes unstoppable. The moment you take full responsibility for your life is the moment freedom begins. Responsibility is often misunderstood as blame, as PR, sure, as something heavy you have to carry. In truth, responsibility is power. The instant you stop pointing outward and start looking inward, you reclaim control over your future. As long as someone or something else is responsible for how you feel, where you are, or what you have, you are not free. You are waiting, and waiting is the slowest way to live. Most people give away their power without realizing it. They blame circumstances, timing, other people, the past, the economy, their upbringing. These explanations may be understandable, but they are not useful. Every excuse, no matter how valid it sounds, keeps you stuck in the role of reactor instead of creator. Responsibility ends that cycle. It says, this is my life, and no one is coming to fix it for me. That realization can feel confronting, but it is also liberating. When you accept responsibility, you stop asking why this happened to you and start asking what you can do about it. That single shift changes everything. Problems become challenges. Setbacks become lessons. Mistakes become feedback. You are no longer waiting for permission to move forward because you have given it to yourself. That is where freedom lives, in the willingness to own both your results and your responses. Responsibility also eliminates victimhood. A victim waits for rescue. A responsible person takes action. Even when the situation is unfair, even when the odds are stacked, responsibility keeps you moving. It does not deny reality. It empowers you within it. You may not control everything that happens, but you always control what it means and what you do next. That control is the foundation of confidence and self-respect. Taking responsibility requires courage because it removes the safety net of excuses. You can no longer hide behind reasons. You have to confront your habits, your standards, and your choices honestly. But that honesty creates clarity, and clarity creates momentum. Once you see where you are truly contributing to your own results, you gain the ability to change them. Freedom does not come from having more options. It comes from owning your choices. When you own your choices, you stop feeling trapped. You realize that every moment contains a decision, and every decision shapes your direction. Even choosing not to choose is a choice. Responsibility brings awareness to that truth and invites you to live deliberately instead of by default. People often fear responsibility because they think it will limit them. In reality, it expands them. The more responsibility you take, the more capable you become. You build trust with yourself. You prove that you can handle challenges. You stop seeing yourself as someone life happens to and start seeing yourself as someone who makes life happen. Freedom is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of ownership. When you fully accept that your life is yours to shape, you stop waiting for change and start becoming it. And in that moment, when responsibility is embraced instead of resisted, you experience the deepest form of freedom, the freedom to choose your path and walk it with intention. A true decision is not something you revisit every morning. It is something you align with every day. When you decide once and decide decisively, you remove the internal debate that drains most people's energy. The problem is not that people fail too often, it's that they keep renegotiating their commitments. Each time you reconsider, you weaken the decision and strengthen doubt. A real decision ends negotiation. It draws a clear boundary between who you were and who you are becoming. Deciding once does not mean the path will be easy. It means the path is chosen. Challenges no longer become reasons to stop. They become part of the process you expected. When obstacles appear, you don't ask if you should continue. You ask how to adapt. That shift alone saves years of emotional exhaustion. You stop fighting yourself and start directing yourself. Alignment is what gives a decision power. If your words say one thing, but your actions say another, the decision is hollow. Alignment means your habits, your environment, and your daily behaviors support the identity you've chosen. You structure your life to make the right actions easier and the wrong ones harder. You stop relying on willpower and start building systems that reinforce your commitment. This is how decisions turn into results. When you decide once, you also raise your standards. Standards are the invisible rules that govern your behavior. They determine what you tolerate and what you walk away from. A decisive person does not wait for motivation to uphold their standards. They live by them. They no longer accept excuses from themselves because those excuses contradict the decision they've made. Standards create consistency, and consistency builds trust with yourself. Alignment also requires honesty. You must be willing to notice when your actions drift from your decision and correct course quickly, not with guilt or self-judgment, but with responsibility.